Hi friends, welcome back. We are reading through Bardskull. We're still in chapter 1. I'm joined tonight by one of our legends in the community, Gabi. Hi Gabi, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. Gabi is one of our mentors. She spends a lot of time not only writing, but also encouraging other members to write and offering editing services. So what we're doing is we've got this little session we're putting together in the new year called Legends Live, where I've got a special selection of legends from our community that I'm inviting to come and just think through and read through interesting things with me. We're starting with this one book called Bardskull. I'm trying to point at it here on the screen. There you go. If you didn't yet watch the first episode, check that out. It's where I introduced the idea. And if you've never heard of Marti Shaw, he is one of my heroes, and he writes a number of phenomenal books about the healing power of mythology, how it's a real thing, and how mythology is not just something past, it is something that is alive. It's like oxygen for your soul. Now, in fact, I'm going to take that, well, he takes it to the next step too, but I'll just sort of throw it in now, which is all we do is in our storytelling is tell mythology. And so his book, Bardskull, is about getting into the headspace, getting into the mindset, getting into the skull of a bard, of an ancient storyteller from the ancient world, before we got into all of the silly thinking and stinking thinking of modernity and modern world. He's somebody who's trying to go back to, what happens when you live in a world that is fully alive, where angels and spirits can communicate with you, and your job is to discern between them. And so what he does, and again, check out the first episode. I don't want to get into it too much. We just want to keep punching through. What he does is he goes and he sits out in either his back garden, or he walks around through the forests of his little area to find out what stories come to him, what stories does he tell the world, and what does he learn from the angels and the spirits that are in that area. And it's such a fun and different way of thinking about being an author that what we're going to do now is, I'll read a little selection. The book is quite, not R-rated, but it's quite for grown-ups. It's a very mature topic, so we're going to sort of PG it up a little bit. And Gabi has not yet read the book, so that's kind of cool. Not everybody will read the book as we go through these things. It's a fun way to get knee-jerk reactions to stuff and just walk around questions. And so hopefully we have some fun. Hopefully we all learn something. And hopefully I inspire you to check the link in the description and buy your own copy of Bardskull, especially as an adult, legend. This is really good stuff. Okay. Any thoughts or anything before we get in, Gabi, at that point?
No, I'm just raring to go.
All right, let's see what happens. Okay, so here's this next reading. We're just going to go into it cold. So, in the middle of watching stories, I am being watched. There's something up there on the ridge looking at me. No, it's not what you think it is. It's not death, at least not especially. No more than usual. But there's something up there. It seems to be talking to itself, but the words are mangled. I just can't make them out. When I was numbskull, I always thought someone was watching me. This watcher would leap benignly from behind a bush and inform me that I came from another family far away and I had to leave immediately for some kind of sea voyage. It was all terribly important, and both they and I would require cloaks to pull the adventure off. Well, then you get older, and you realize no one's eyes are on you most of the time. You're not even in focus to the general public. You're just a kind of nervy blur. Well, so finally today, I am being witnessed. Isn't this what I've been waiting for? Doesn't seem so intoxicating now. This is not Jack in the Green, or Geronimo, or a giggling Dalai Lama. This is some guy on a horse speaking backwards words to himself. I don't have time for this. One thing I have learned in 48 years is that there are certain things we need to turn our head away from. And I turn my head away from you. We don't have to see everything that is out there to see, so I choose not to see you. You are blinded to me. Horsemen pass by. And I'll skip ahead to a little highlight and then we'll pause. He says, let me talk about Ted and Robert again. Let's turn the volume down on this egregore, this watcher. I mean, I've heard about this kind of thing, that if you do enough magical work, you attract the attention of a spiritual companion, a spooky being you half glimpse that sort of pads along beside you. Sometimes a parasite. sometimes a savior. The whole thing is complex. They may become your lord or your servant, but right now I'm changing the subject. Okay, we'll pause.
There is so much to unpack right there.
So what goes through your mind? First thoughts, just run through them.
Okay, first thoughts. Man, there were so many.
It's whatever. Yeah.
I really liked the idea of that person on the ridge, whether it was an analogy, whether it was a literal person or not. And sorry, I'm just thinking there's so many things I could go for. So the thing about being seen and how he mentions that it's not this grandiose thing that you have in mind. It's not, and I just think of it in terms of kind of the commercial world. Being seen it's not this flash and bang and the photographs and the money and the sales and the deals and the movies and all of that. That just doesn't happen. I mean, sure, it happens once in a while to someone with an immense amount of luck or bad luck, depending on how you look at it. But to be seen, it's a very quiet thing. And what I really loved then on top of that was, so this particular instance of being seen, the guy was speaking backwards. He was saying gibberish. So he was seeing Marti Shaw, is that his name? Whether it was an actual person or whether it's just an analogy, he was seeing Marti Shaw, but he wasn't perceiving, he wasn't appreciating. He just saw him, He noticed him, and nothing really came out of that. And that also feels like it happens. There's the grandiose idea of fame and being seen and the glitz and the Instagram followers and all that. And that's not really a big thing. It's not a thing that happens, or if it does happen, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And then there are the moments that you are seen, but it's also not even on a personal level. It's not even on a micro scale. Mm-hmm. Its own immense grandiose thing. And that then in turn made me think of then how rare and how beautiful those moments are when you are seen, and then the speech isn't backwards, it's not distracted, and then you're able to make that connection with someone, which he didn't go into, but that was just my next thought. Yeah, that was one of the many things that went through my head when I was listening.
No, that's very good. I like that. That didn't even occur to me. So for me, the thought that he shared of like when we're young, so we're talking about writers here. I'm trying to find ways to thoughts to how we tie this into our writing and stuff. Like, earlier when we write a lot of wish fulfillment. I completely did. I'm probably still doing it for a long time. Our first novel is probably, a lot of our stories are going to be working through a bunch of wish fulfillment stuff. What we want to get out of the world, we think we're important. We would need to be needed. We want to be wanted, and we want to be important. And then you grow up and you find out, like, well, that's not actually how the world works. At least not the way you thought. In this Christian sense, we know that there is an ultimate importance to who we are as individuals. But at the same time, the world doesn't care. And so we have to go about figuring that out, differently. And so then he says, like, then you start, when you sort of realize that you're, nobody's actually waiting for you. You actually have to grow up and do something with your life. And then when you start cultivating, let's call it spiritual awareness. And that's when he says, sometimes there are some people who can very clearly see these things. Now, in Martin's case, let's take it as an assumption that he's actually seeing some kind of a spiritual thing that is being communicated to him. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good angel. In fact, he's saying pretty obviously, this watcher, there's something off, something dour about this thing. It feels foul and not fair. And so he's like, okay, the part of the job is to not pay attention to everything that reveals itself to you. So he says the phrase, if you do enough magical work, that you can say if you do enough spiritual work, that he's using it in the same I would think, in the same context. You do enough spiritual stuff, you're going to start attracting things to you, because that's how you start leveling up. It's like every game works. The more you skill up, the bigger bosses you have to deal with, the further places you have to go. Same thing in life, same thing in your spiritual life.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I thought that, I liked the way that he said that. You can attract the attention of a spiritual companion, and they kind of pad alongside you. And if you're not careful, if you're not discerning, it can be a parasite. And the ugly thing about parasites is they sort of glom onto you. You cling, they leech away your life, and you have no idea what's going on. Form a symbiosis, and you start incorporating them into your life. And I mean, it's an awful, concept. But then the other is where it could be something like a savior or a helpful being. And at that
Absolutely.
we would say stuff like patron saints,
Yeah.
they choose us before we choose them. And if they feel like really obvious presences, like we feel pulled towards them, it's because they're like pulling on us first, initiating that. So I like that sense of, as you start, especially with your writing, and here's where we're taking not just like writing, hey, let's have fun and get published and do anthologies, but no, writing as I'm also trying to pay very deep attention to things that matter to me. That's a spiritual activity. That's a very contemplative thing, to pay attention to your soul that way. You start doing that, you also start attracting these sorts of things that can help you clarify, how do you say, cultivating good habits or losing yourself into your ego and cultivating bad habits. And I mean, we've seen a lot of the best sellers that cultivate a lot of very bad habits, from specific impulses and silly stuff. So,
And I've even experienced a little bit of that kind of parasitic feel when you start to buy into that mentality of trying to pay attention to every possible thing that can look at you. So just trying to, because the way that you were just saying it reminded me of when someone tries to write, myself included, and you're trying to I don't even want to say appeal, because you're not appealing to everyone. You're trying to appease everyone. You're trying to write something that everyone will like decently enough. And when you let that be your driving factor, I guarantee you all the spiritual depth just drains out of it. Gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. And then with that being gone, then you're chasing this attention from this thing that is being a parasite, and it sucks the living daylights out of you. It really does.
Yeah.
And then when you slow down and you stop and you're like, wait, why am I writing? Why am I doing this? And, you let God give you that reminder that, hey, this is not about just being a bestseller. This is not about, selling your book to every one of your Instagram followers or whatever. This is about a story. This is about a piece, because it's like a piece of God's heart, really. Like we all are a piece of God's heart, including the angels and including these stories. He's like, I want to give you this piece of my heart. It's not a commercial thing. It's this very personal thing. And that is when storytelling goes from being the parasite that I had let it become into being that savior. And it's just a whole nother playing field. The writing, just starts to be fun again. But then it carries this depth, and it carries this fulfillment of itself. So instead of sucking the life out of you, it's actually feeding you. And I was thinking a lot about that as you were talking and as you were reading from the script, not the script, the excerpt.
Yeah. Mary, it's so nice to have you join us. Mary is also a mentor in our community who spends time helping authors to read through things, and she provides feedback. It's nice to have you with us, Mary. Welcome to Legends Live.
Thank you. This is a great honor to be here.
I think it's going to be fun. Our plan is to keep doing this every week and just read these short selections and just walk around them and talk through them together and see what thoughts come to mind. Some of us have not maybe read the book, which is fine. And I think, Mary, you've read it or through it as well. You've read chapter 1 or a couple of the chapters. I have completely forgotten what's through most of the book because I burned through it like a year ago. So it's like reading afresh for me a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to read another little selection here, and then we'll just walk around that. Excuse me. So he's saying here, if you might remember from the first video, we talked about how the bards underwent a frozening, right? Well, then he says this: there are other traditions. The bardic schools and the information inside them weren't just sequestered breathlessly away. Women, grannies, sisters, aunts, mothers We told stories too, sang songs by the fire. Now he's talking in the person of a lady, woman, grandmother character who's appeared. We weren't scolded for it. We delighted the settlement when the embers glowed. We may not have had a swan feather cloak like the preening boys of the High Hall, but we carried the nutrition of these stories just as much as they ever did. Our cooking pots simmered, spat, and made magically delirious the stories of our grandmothers. Our hands pulled tales from the earth as wonderful as the sweet potato or the onion. Imagine that. We had our groves, our rituals, our mapping of the year, and don't you dare say we didn't. We have held fairy tales in our breast milk for thousands of years and fed them to our kids. But we made the world, baby. We seized the sky and the earth, fire and water. No nailed-up horseshoe could bar our way, no scuttled male magic. We emitted loose chirrup and the ramshackle truth of fawn and cockle. Our very mouth juice was a swagger den of the deep dreaming bell of things. Mary, with a smile like that, I gotta ask you, what do you think? What's God in your mind?
Love that part. I love that part of the, and I just love how he can capture all these different voices in this one story. It really is like he is passing through different myths, and he has these different, all these different characters that have like their whole unique personality. And yeah, the line, we made the world, baby. But I think there's a lot of truth in this. And that maybe the mothers and the grandmothers don't always get a lot of fanfare. Maybe they're not recorded in the written records, but they do hold the stories and the traditions from one generation to the next. That's the first way a lot of people hear a story is from their mother or their grandmother, when they're young. And I think that it has kind of a special place, even if it's not as as much fanfare as the fancy bards.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, like you said, Mary, the first place that we hear stories are from our mothers, our aunties, our grandmas. And particularly, like you said, without all the fanfare, because it's really easy to think of literature and art and writing to only be the really glitzy stuff, the New York Times bestsellers, even just the fact that the novel is, bound versus it being a Google Doc. And it's not, because it's daily life. Like the stories that feed us, they are daily life. I know there's a lady, her name is Jen Fulweiler. She's a Catholic comedian, but she's also a podcaster. And she says, every day you guys are making lore. And it's like, yeah. And that's what feeds us, because he kept comparing it to food, and so those stories, that is how they feed us. The fact that they are just our everyday lives and us experiencing our everyday lives versus it having to be this very polished up, glittery, not real thing that some avenues of books can sometimes be, particularly when they're so hyped up and they lose that motherly, grandmotherly aspect of them.
Go ahead, Mary. Keep pulling. I'm going to defer to you ladies, especially on this selection. So keep going. What's on your mind?
Well, let's just think about that, like how it's like food, and that it's like, what you think of with a mother or grandmother, like the feminine role is to feed and to nurture. So that's interesting that he does use a lot of that imagery in this part of the story. Yeah, that's, and it also seems very wholesome too. Like, it's not really about, it's really about passing something on to the next generation, and it ties into what you were saying about how how myth, like the relationship it has with the soul. I can't remember the exact line that he says there about, it's like
Oxygen
like
for the soul?
oxygen for the soul, and kind of like food, something that you need. And so it's like interesting to think of, like, that's what the female role can be, is giving that food really early on, in the beginning stages of life, because they're the closest to those early stages.
And I think Gabi and I were chatting before we hit record. catching up on where this book is going, but he's very much about trying to be a bard of the specific area where he lives. So he's not just like going through all kinds of mythology. He's trying to reroot himself and literally ground himself back in the mythology of his people, and then I guess maybe see if there are any new stories that want to be communicated or want to come and land in him so that he can then keep them alive and share them. But that sense of it's a very intentional return back to the literal forests and the earth and the food of his specific area. And so I liked where they were saying, we weren't scolded for telling stories by the fire. We delighted the settlement when the embers glowed, and we had our groves, our rituals, our mapping of the year. And that just makes me think about, not only how men and women not just tackle things differently, but go about doing things on different time scales. Like when I'm thinking of like Homer and the Iliad and the massive epics of like Hercules and so on. And why are those kinds of stories told? It's like, well, young men and men in general need a cause to fight for, need something to stand up for, to use their strength to settle and to secure and, to create that safety. That's one function of one particular kind of myth. And then what he's saying right here is that even just the making of food and the gathering around a fireplace, and that's not just in itself a story, but it's wrapped up in story as well. And it's those moments that women also use in, with your specific charism that you also use to share and to delight people. And if you were to pulling on that line or just walking around that idea, how that relates to us as authors, and all three of us here are authors. I think both of you are published. I'm sort of self-published, and you're probably self-published a bit too. But anyhow, we're all authors, and there's books out there or germinating. Bringing this home for our community, for people of us who are authors, any thoughts or recommendations along kind of what we talked about?
I think my biggest recommendation is kind of what I was talking about, or what we all were talking about earlier, which is that so writing, whether it be a hobby, whether it be a career, whether it be whatever form it takes, it should not be draining you. It should be feeding you. It should be nurturing you. It should be giving you more energy, not sucking it away. And sometimes it takes some playing around to figure out how to do that. Sometimes it takes some soul searching, and it happens to it happens to me where I get the way to write where I'm doing it for God. I'm listening for this piece of God's heart that he wants to share with me. I'm not doing it for the glitz and the glam. I'm doing it because it's this great thing, this piece of God, this piece of me that I want to share. And then I get rolling and then I backslide. And so just to keep coming back to that, remembering that it is meant to feed you. It is meant to be like a mother we hold. Yeah, it's meant to be that, not something that is going to just, again, like the parasite he was talking about, it shouldn't suck the life out of you.
Mary, I really want to know what you think about this. But before that, Gabi, what do you think is going on? Like you say, when you struggle with the doldrums and you feel drained and it doesn't feel life-giving, what do you think is going on? Or how do you sort of not fix that, but what do you change to get it so that it works again for you?
Yeah, so for me, I almost every time, 201, this is happening because I'm getting excited, but then I'm misplacing that excitement with the need for a lot of people to see it. Like he was talking about, I'm like, I need to share this more on Instagram. I need to market it more. I need to do more books because I need to share. And it's sprouted from a well-intentioned want to share this story. But when the need for other people to see it starts trump, and not only just for other people to see it, for a lot of random other people to see it, just like people that I don't even know, when that starts to trump the actual me writing, me sharing this story, me trying to be in tune with what God is wanting to share with me and then onto the page and then to others, that's when I start getting tired, because then it just starts being a thing that I'm trying to do, that I'm trying to finish, this thing that I'm chasing after that does not come quickly, if at all, And then the way I honestly need, there's probably a better way to do it than I tend to do, but I'm still playing with that. I'm still exploring. But what I tend to do is just take a break. Usually I wind up grinding myself to exhaustion, which is when I notice, hey, my priorities have slipped here. And then I stop. I take a break. And then when that itch comes back, then I've remembered, oh, this is why I love writing. This is why I got into this in the first place. So my little cycle of go, 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 go until you realize that you're in pain, essentially, and then stop. I think it's absolutely a viable option. If there are people out there who are feeling burnout, they're feeling writer's block, and they just need to stop, it works. It really does. I, in the meantime, am trying to, discover a way where I don't get to the point of burnout, where I can keep God and his stories as the focus of it versus me and these kind of plans. They're not even planned. These imaginations.
Working. Yeah.
My
What's your working theory to, like, as you said, not get to a state of burnout? What's your other?
That's a good question. I think is to, well, kind of like what Marti Shaw said. It's to not want to not. I'm stammering a little bit. To catch myself when I start noticing myself wanting to be seen by everyone. To catch myself when there's a person who may have noticed, and I just kind of go after that when this is not a good thing to go after at the moment. To just kind of register those moments and then stop and be like, wait. What am I focusing on? And a way that helps me with that is honestly just to go slower. Just to do a little bit less, a little bit more variety. So instead of me trying to hammer out 2,000 words a day because I want to hit this deadline, which of course is still great to, like, I'm still going to, like, have a goal and go for it. But it's helpful to just take this burden of production off of myself. So if I slow down, lower, say, my word count for the day. Recently I've picked up flash fiction. I'm going to work on a little bit of flash fiction every day, just as like a warm-up, as a play around. Something that is low stakes, so it's not taking up so much of my time, but I'm still creating something. So those are the things I've been playing around with most with regard to fixing that.
Nice. Mary, what's going through your mind? We just covered a bunch. What's going through your mind?
Yeah. So a few different things, like thoughts about what can cause, like, the writer's burnout. And I really like Gabrielle, I like hearing your perspective, because it's like, I understand where you're coming from with, like, wanting a lot of people to see it. But I just say that I think that's not my biggest struggle right now. I think for me, what's harder is that I write really intense and emotional writing. And sometimes it touches on old trauma. And I get to a point where I just can't keep going because it's just too hard. Like, it's getting too painful to write. But when that happens, I usually just have to try and balance it out I could try switching what I'm writing, but I think also that that's a good time to go and enlist the help of the community and do something else that's writing related, but maybe not directly writing. So I might send something out to other people to look at it, like an editor, beta readers, or try and, like, encourage some other writers and read something that they've been working on, so that I can kind of get a fresh perspective. Remember, maybe not everything needs to be, like, dire and intense and scatter the world.
I 100% second that. In fact, I wrote these 2 books, and then I have a third one in the works, and I got about a third of the way through, and I realized I'm tired of these same 6 characters' trauma. Like, I need a break. I'm tired. They're making me sad. And what you said was really nice about the variety and doing something else writing related, because then, I started a different project, and at first I had in mind that it was going to be very heavy as well. And there's still elements of that. But as I started writing it, I found that I was able to, it's funny. So it's a dark fantasy, but I'm able to add like this sardonic wit and this dry humor to it, and that's really freeing. So I completely sympathize. I know exactly what you're feeling with the, oh my goodness, my own story is making.
That's a will be good beta reader partner sometime.
Okay, great. To go back a little bit further, Mary, any thoughts on sort of the reading selection? Gabi had said something, but I saw you taking notes. I was curious if there's anything else you wanted to add as well.
Yes. So I did want to say something about like wanting your writing to be seen by lots of people. So I really like when I started like publicly writing, it was when I was doing a blog talking about the 19 months I spent in a convent, and I started that in 2021 because people had kept asking me they wanted to hear my story. So I just started doing it in blog form, and I was very focused on like, writing the best, story I could, but also I really wanted lots and lots of people to read it. It seemed so important that lots of people should read it. But I think as time went on, I realized that I don't think that was the real intent or purpose, was to have like a huge audience. I did have a staple audience, like about 70 people who would read it every week. Just good. But it was more about like not so much having a lot of people read it, but the right people read it. People sent me messages and things about how much it's touched their lives and given them. Some of them are other women who lost a convent, or just like who are really inspired by the story. I know that's so even if it's not like reaching thousands of people, if you're like really having a meaning and impact on a few people, I think it's definitely worth it to keep writing. So I guess that's my advice. That's what I try and think of. Like, okay, it doesn't have to be for a lot of people. It's just, I guess, going to write the best story I can for these few people who it's going to really mean a lot to.
That is excellent advice. I'm the neophyte that's still trying to, work my way up to some kind of following. And it's like, no, that's not the point. The point is the story for these people, and it's going to be that nurturing, mother's milk to them. And then it's so much more meaningful and beautiful that way. So yeah, I'm going to keep that right at the front of my mind every time that other temptation starts to sneak in.
Yeah, and maybe your story, maybe our stories will like spark something in the next generation, and then like the next J.R.R. Tolkien or C.S. Lewis will like rise.
Well, all the dog-eared copies of Don't and Avalon, that's not gotta be fun. All right, friends, this has been wonderful. Thank you both for jumping on tonight. We're going to be back. Yeah, we'll be back again next week. So if you're not yet, subscribe to the channel. And if you've not yet heard of Marti Shaw, check the link in the description to buy your own copy of this book. Support him. His work is phenomenal. And I'm hoping that we can continue to be inspired by, the depth of his thinking. And we'll also continue to get into other authors. Like there's Tolkien and George MacDonald and phenomenal people who are, the founding fathers of, fiction, Catholic fiction, inspiration, imagination in the modern world. But the nice thing is that he's alive today. Marti Shaw is alive today, and a phenomenal person to be inspired by. And it's a bit like when the raven in sacred scripture would appear with a burning coal to purify, the prophet out in the desert, and he like open wide and just drop in. Not everything is what is that line? Aslan's not a tame lion. Mythology and imagination and fiction, it's not all necessarily tame stuff that's all happy and it means nothing. It's like, no, it can be really very serious. Can also be like really, really fun. I'm not saying that everything has to be like, super religious and liturgical. And in fact, we're pretty adamant that you shouldn't have, if you want to, you can, but you don't have to, and you shouldn't have like an altar call in your story. Like just tell the story, because the story in and of itself can be a very valuable and a very real thing that can be helpful to somebody. And there's probably a reason why it's stuck in you and you're, ingesting it and turning it into something that can then be shared with somebody else, And sometimes you just need to finish writing the thing to figure out why it matters to you. These are not always things that we control. And that's why this book, Bardskull, is so fascinating, because it's like, what happens if
Did he freeze for
you
you?
open the top of your head and you let your intuiting pour in and then through you maybe, and you're part of this process, right? So I think it's going to continue being a whole lot of fun, and we plan to be back next week. So please like this video, subscribe, and if you haven't yet, join our community at legendfiction.com. Till next time, keep writing. May the lore be with you.
This is the way.